Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to my presentation. My presentation will be titled Designing an online course unit with PASS. My name is Nancy. So, in terms of outline, I'll start with the purpose of the presentation and then discuss context that focus basically on issues in online instruction. A second aspect of the context will focus on my online writing class, and then I will present the driving questions, the theoretical framework, which is PASS, that informs the discussion here. And then I will discuss how I use PASS to design my course unit. Then I will conclude with a reflection on my experience of using PASS to design my course unit. So in this presentation, I will discuss how I use PASS as a framework for designing a unit on multimodal composition for a writing class. Based on this experience, I reflect on the affordances of this approach, especially for first-time online literacy instructors who are looking for a structure to teach writing in a smooth and engaging. So, in terms of the context, I think that it's important, since this is an online class, it's important to highlight some of the issues that have been identified with online learning. For instance, online learning, there's been a lot of emphasis on accessibility and inclusion because these are very fundamental to making online learning available to every student, irrespective of their background. So whether a student is disabled, is and so on and so forth, they should still be able to have access and feel included in the class. And this moves, beyond technological issues and even include questions like linguistics and so on and so forth. Now, in the context of my my class is basically a first year composition course, and so the purpose is to really get students acquainted with writing within a university setting. The course has three components. There's a narrative writing, persuasive writing, and multimodal composition. The final project of the course is a multimodal composition, and we also have the asynchronous session. So at the end of the class, students are supposed to present a multimodal composition. This multimodal composition is about 40% of the class, which basically means that this assignment, unlike the other assignment, takes a higher portion of the grading, and so it's a high stake assignment, and students need to do um, um, present their best work. Um, um, Otherwise, that could affect their grading since it's about 40% of the score. And then the class also takes place synchronously on Zoom. So we meet on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays and for our Zoom sessions. And we also have Canvas as a course management system, which means that we can share information, we can information announcements, course um, materials, and so on and so forth, and have discussions as well. So, in terms of the driving question, in designing my multimodal composition, the multimodal unit of the online writing class, the question I ask myself is how do I effectively design a multimodal unit that gives students a sense of what they need to expect in this unit of the course? And so I decided that I wanted to use PASS. I also want to highlight the fact that throughout the semester, I have been using PASS to design different units of my course. So this is not necessarily related to the multimodal composition, but for the purposes of this presentation, I decided to highlight on how I used PASS to design my multimodal unit. Now, PASS is a framework that it's basically an acronym that contains words like personal, responsive, strategic, and accessible. And basically, PASS suggests that any design of an online course should be personal, it should be responsive, it should be strategic, and it should be accessible. So this is basically the idea that informed my own the creation of the units, the multimodal units of my class. And so, in terms of personal, one of the things I did was to, for instance, include a welcome message. So I started off by saying hello everyone, welcome, and then welcome them to the unit of the course, and then explained what basically introduced them to explain what the unit was hoping to achieve and so on and so forth. And over here, I also direct them to other information that's needed, right? So, for instance, I tell them that for a recorded summary of this unit, click on the icon below, and the recorded version of the unit is very important because the voice, I included the voice or the audio recording because I think that adds a personal touch to the information that I was trying to give. And so, including the audio, of course, I was thinking of questions of accessibility. However, including the audio was also part of my effort to include, the personal in, my design of the unit. So, in terms of accessibility, one of the things I did a number of things. One of them included the fact that I presented information in different formats. So, for instance, some information was presented in the written mode, and then information was presented in the audio mode. Students could choose to listen to the oral mode, or they could choose to listen to the information presented in the written mode. But they could also look at both, right? So the thing the reasoning for that is that I wanted students to have the option to work with whatever mode was useful for them. And then also, in terms of accessibility, I believe that accessibility is not just about technology and so on, it's also very much about language. And so I paid particular attention to the language I was using, and because of that, I try to use very simple language so that students can read and understand, or listen and understand in very simple terms what was expected of them in this particular course. I also use repetition a lot, especially in the audio recording. I use repetition to emphasize some of the key things that they needed to pay attention to as they work on the course. But also in terms of design, I use things like color, bold, and so on and so forth to highlight important ideas in the text. So these are some of the strategies I use to ensure accessibility in the class. Then I also try to be very responsive, and for me, I feel that responsiveness is a two-way affair. It means that for the instructor to be responsive, they need feedback from the student, and then of course the students also need feedback from the instructor. And so I felt that in one important context for my project was that the students were mainly, this was the first time they were creating a multimodal text. And so it was important for me to find out how comfortable they were with the assignment. One, what they knew about multimodality. Two, and then three, what technologies they were familiar with. Because I felt that feedback will help me to decide what kind of support was needed in the class. And so that's what I did. I decided to have a survey, right? And using the survey was basically an opportunity for me to have student feedback and instructor feedback, and all of these was supposed to feed into the activities for the multimodal unit. Secondly, I scaffolded the unit, and the whole idea of scaffolding the unit was that ultimately, in the end, the plan was that at the end of the unit, students will have all the skills and knowledge to complete the multimodal assignment. So we start off with a survey, then we move on to workshops on multimodal tools. From the survey, we get to know what kinds of technology students know. And then from then on, we get to know, okay, this is where students need some sort of intervention or help. And so we have the workshop on multimodal too, and then we provide the help, and And then the next thing we talk about is, we give students the opportunity to do some multimodal analysis of some rhetorical analysis of multimodal text, which basically introduces them to the rhetoric of multimodality. And then, of course, at the very end, students also get to analyze some multimodal text and engage with them. So ultimately, by the time we finish the course, students will not just have the technological competence, but they will also have the rhetorical knowledge to create effective multimodal text. And also in making the text, in making the unit responsive, I decided to use a question and answer format. And so student, for instance, I presented the information in question form and in the explanation in the form of an answer. And so if you look at the example here, you see that it says, how long is this unit? Right? And then I go on to explain. I presented the unit in question and answer format because it was a way for me to anticipate the questions that students had about the unit and then provide answers, that highlighted the key information that they needed to provide. But it was also very important for me to keep the information as brief as possible so that, just to ensure that students will read. Because the thing with online learning is that sometimes there's so much to read that students get overwhelmed. And so for me, my intention was to make things as simple and as brief as possible so that students can read and highlight the most important things that they needed to know. And then also in terms of being strategic, I, for instance, decided that instead of, writing block and blocks of, paragraphs, I would, have present some aspect of the information in the form of a table. So for instance, I indicated the weeks, the days, the topic, and then the assignment, right? So students knew when they were supposed to submit assignments, what they were supposed to read on particular days, and what was expected of them, for each class. This made, in many ways, this made things easier. And just by looking at the table, they could identify the most important, the core ideas, or the core information that was important for a particular section of the class. So basically, to conclude, I just want to say that in my experience, I find that PASS is a very important framework, especially for designing an effective online writing class, in the sense that it helps you to be intentional about some of the choices that you make, but it also helps you to be student-centered in the sense that you're always considering things from the student's perspective and then also from your own perspective. But most importantly, for a first time online literacy instruction, PASS provided a very simple framework with which I could actually reflect on my actions as an online literacy instructor. And sometimes my decisions did not necessarily bear the fruits that I expected. But the thing about PASS is that you always have the opportunity to go back and make changes based on the responses that you get from the student. So these are some of the references I used in my work. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.